The beam from my headlamp caught the glimmer of something that wasn't copper in the mine wall. I stepped closer, the crunch of my boots reverberating through the narrow passage. "Griffin, you need to see this," Dr. Patel called from 20 feet ahead, her voice tight with excitement. I quickened my pace, carefully navigating the uneven ground of the Atacama mine. I breathed in the cool, dry air that carried the musty scent of old earth. Our team had been following electromagnetic anomalies for 3 days, unusual readings that had brought our international research group to this remote location in Chile. "What have you found?" I asked, reaching Camila's position. She stepped aside, revealing an exposed section of rock face that seemed out of place among the surrounding geology. Her headlamp illuminated what appeared to be geometric patterns etched into the stone. "These aren't natural formations," she said, running her fingers along the symbols. "And they don't match any known mining markings from the region." I switched my headlamp to its highest setting and examined the patterns more closely. They weren't just random etchings. They formed a perfect rectangle about 7 feet tall. The symbols along the edges pulsed faintly, with a blue luminescence when touched. "Maya," I called over my shoulder, "bring the electromagnetic sensor." Maya approached with quick, efficient steps. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had faced far worse than dark mines. "Already on it," she replied, handing me the device. "The readings are off the chart, Dr. Ross. Whatever this is, it's the source of the anomalies we've been tracking." Dr. Leon Mercer pushed his way forward, vibrating with barely contained enthusiasm. "The patterns show mathematical properties that shouldn't be possible in natural formations," he said, already sketching the symbols in his notebook. I pressed my palm against the center of the rectangle. The stone felt unnaturally warm beneath my touch. "This isn't just a carved door representation," I murmured. "I think it's an actual door." The rest of our specialists gathered around, geologists, archaeologists, and engineers, all drawn by the discovery. We'd come to Chile following rumors of unusual findings during mining operations, but none of us had expected anything like this. "We need to document everything before we attempt to open it," I said, falling back on scientific protocol to mask my growing excitement. For the next hour, we photographed, measured, and cataloged every aspect of the door and surrounding rock. The symbols defied categorization. They weren't Incan, Mayan, or any other known ancient script. They possessed a fluid quality that seemed to change slightly when viewed from different angles. "The symbols appear to be arranged in a specific sequence," Camila observed with concentration. "Possibly a locking mechanism or a key of some kind." Maya set up additional sensors around the perimeter. "There's a faint energy signature emanating from behind the door. Nothing dangerous, but definitely not normal." Finally, we'd gathered all the preliminary data we could. The team looked to me expectantly. The decision to proceed rested on my shoulders. "Let's try to open it," I said, unable to keep the edge of anticipation from my voice. We searched for any mechanism that might release the door. It was Maya who discovered the central symbol could be rotated clockwise. As she turned it, other symbols moved in response, aligning into new patterns. "It's like a combination lock," she muttered, her fingers working with precision. A low rumble vibrated through the mine passage. Dust sifted down from the ceiling as the stone door began to recede inward, revealing darkness beyond. "Everyone stay back," I ordered, shining my light into the opening. The beam disappeared into emptiness, revealing no visible floor or walls within reach of our lights. "That's impossible," one of the geologists whispered. "There should be solid rock behind this wall." I took a cautious step forward, testing the threshold. Instead of the rock floor I expected, my boot landed on smooth stone of a different composition. I moved forward another step, and the space opened up around me. "Griffin, wait for us," Camila called, hurrying to join me. One by one, the team crossed the threshold. As we moved forward, the mine passage behind us seemed to recede, and the space before us expanded beyond what should have been physically possible given the mountain's geology. This defies all known laws of spatial physics, Dr. Mercer said quietly. Our combined headlamps revealed a vast chamber filled with structures that made my brain hurt trying to comprehend. Buildings with impossible angles rose before us, constructed of materials that reflected our lights with prismatic effect. Streets, if you could call them that, wound between structures in patterns that seemed to fold into themselves. My God, I breathed. We've found a city. The architecture followed mathematical principles that shouldn't work, corners that connected at impossible angles, stairways that looped back to their starting points while continuously ascending, columns that supported massive structures while appearing too delicate to bear any weight at all. This isn't human construction, I said, the realization hitting me with certainty. We're looking at evidence of a civilization that existed parallel to humanity, with an entirely different understanding of physical laws. Maya set up portable lights that illuminated more of the chamber. The dating equipment is going haywire, she reported, looking confused at her instruments. Either this place is interfering with the readings or these structures are older than our equipment can measure. As we moved deeper into the city, I noticed something troubling. Several team members kept glancing over their shoulders, their expressions uneasy. Did anyone else see that? One of the archaeologists asked, pointing to a darkened doorway to our left. See what? I asked. A shadow. It moved when I turned my head, but there was definitely something there. Similar reports came from other team members as we continued our exploration. Shadowy figures appeared at the edge of vision, disappearing when directly observed. I caught glimpses myself, fluid movements just beyond the reach of our lights. Our equipment began malfunctioning in strange ways. Cameras captured only portions of structures, and audio recorders picked up whispers that weren't there during recording. Battery levels dropped in specific patterns rather than gradually. This isn't random interference, Maya said after examining several devices. The failures follow mathematical sequences, prime numbers, Fibonacci sequences, and other patterns. It's as if something intelligent is controlling which functions work. Camila had been quiet for some time, studying her tablet with intense concentration. She called me over to a relatively flat wall covered in the same symbols as the door. Griffin, I've been comparing these symbols to our geological database, she said. They correlate to specific locations around the world, all sites of unusual seismic activity that's never been properly explained. She showed me her findings, a map with dots highlighting locations in Egypt, Peru, Greece, China, and dozens of other places. You're saying there are more doors like this one? I asked. I think these symbols represent a network, she replied, and the Atacama was just one node in that network. Our exploration led us to what appeared to be a central chamber, a vast circular space with multiple passages branching off in different directions. Each passageway was marked with distinct symbols above its entrance. It's like a hub, Maya observed. These could lead to different sections of the city, or maybe to something else entirely. That's exactly what I was thinking, I finished, considering Camila's network theory. After hours of documentation and preliminary exploration, I gathered the team in the central chamber to plan our next move. We need to cover more ground, I decided, even though unease had settled over me. Those shadow movements had become more frequent, and I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched. We'll split into groups and explore different passages. I assigned teams to each doorway, deliberately keeping our most experienced researchers as team leaders. Leon, I said, turning to Dr. Mercer, take that passage. I pointed to an archway covered in particularly complex symbols that seemed to rearrange themselves when viewed too long. Those markings match some of the theoretical models you published last year. He nodded, eyes bright with anticipation. Camila, you and I will continue mapping this central chamber and collecting samples. Maya set up a base station here with our communication equipment. As the teams prepared to depart, Maya approached me with a sample container. You should see this, she said, opening the lid to reveal a small fragment of material from one of the structures. I examined the piece carefully. It had the visual properties of metal but felt like liquid under pressure. When I tilted the container, the material maintained its shape, even though it appeared fluid. Initial tests show it contains elements that don't match anything on our periodic table, Maya said. It's literally not made of any materials found on Earth. I stared at the sample, the full implications of our discovery sinking in. We weren't just looking at an ancient civilization. We were looking at something entirely outside our understanding of reality. The teams departed down their assigned passages, headlamps creating bobbing points of light that gradually diminished in the distance. I turned back to the central chamber, preparing to document the impossible architecture that surrounded us. The impossible architecture of the central chamber demanded my full attention. I paced methodically across the space, documenting each structure that defied physical laws. The walls curved at angles that shouldn't support weight yet held firm. Surfaces reflected our lights, with an almost liquid shimmer, even though they felt solid when touched. Maya worked efficiently beside me, setting up the base station with our communication equipment. The ambient temperature had dropped several degrees since we'd entered, our breath now visible in small clouds. "Comms are active," Maya said, adjusting her headset. "All teams should check in every 30 minutes. I nodded, still absorbed in photographing a column that appeared to both twist and remain straight depending on viewing angle. "Good. Let's keep tracking everyone's position." The first few check-ins came right on schedule. Camilla reported finding what appeared to be artifacts in her assigned passage. Other teams described similar impossible architecture extending throughout their sections. Only Leon's team missed their first check-in. "Dr. Mercer, please respond," Maya repeated into her headset, her expression growing concerned. I paused my documentation. How long since their last contact? 45 minutes. They should have reported back 15 minutes ago. We waited another 30 minutes, trying repeatedly to establish contact. By then, most teams had circled back to the central chamber, bringing samples and data from their explorations. Leon's team returned -1 member, Leon himself. "Where's Dr. Mercer?" I asked the geologist who had accompanied him. "He told us to continue mapping while he examined something," the young woman explained, clearly distressed. When we turned back to check on him, he was gone. We searched for almost an hour before returning. I turned to Maya. "We need a search party. Those passages twist back on themselves in ways that don't make sense. He could be lost." Maya nodded, already sorting equipment. "I've got extra emergency lights and the strongest signal transmitters." I gathered 4 volunteers, including Camila. We equipped ourselves with additional batteries and emergency supplies before heading down the passage Leon had been exploring. The twisted architecture seemed even more disorienting now that we were searching for someone. Doorways opened into spaces that shouldn't exist. Stairways led up only to somehow end below their starting points. "Leon," I called, my voice bouncing strangely through the distorted spaces. "Dr. Mercer." We proceeded methodically, marking our path with phosphorescent tags Maya had brought. After nearly 2 hours of searching, Camilla spotted something ahead. "There!" She pointed toward a faint blue glow emanating from around a corner. We quickened our pace, rounding the corner to find a large chamber unlike any we'd seen before. The walls were covered with glowing symbols similar to those on the door, but these moved and changed across the surface like living things. In the center of the room, Leon knelt motionless, his body rigid, eyes open but unseeing. "Leon!" I rushed forward, kneeling beside him. His skin felt ice cold, but he was breathing. His eyes tracked something none of us could see. "He's in some kind of trance," Camila said, checking his pulse. Pupils responsive but dilated. Maya scanned the room with her equipment. These symbols are emitting energy signatures similar to the door, but much stronger. I gently shook Leon's shoulders. "Leon, can you hear me? It's Griffin." No response. The symbols on the wall pulsed faster, their blue glow intensifying. Small patches of Leon's exposed skin on his wrists and neck showed darkened areas, almost like frost patterns. We need to get him out of here, I decided, motioning to the others to help lift him. As we touched him, Leon suddenly gasped, his body convulsing before his eyes focused on mine. "Griffin." His voice sounded hollow, as though coming from much farther away than the inches between us. "We're here. You're safe," I reassured him. Leon gripped my arm with surprising strength. "No, none of us are safe. I saw them. I spoke with them." "Spoke with who, Leon?" Camilla asked gently. "The architects." His eyes were wide, darting between us. "The builders of this place. They showed me everything." I helped him to his feet, noting how he trembled. "Let's get you back to the central chamber. Then you can tell us what you saw." "No time!" Leon's voice rose with panic. "The convergence is accelerating. The doors are opening faster now, staying open longer." "What convergence?" Maya asked, keeping her voice calm even though tension was evident in her posture. "The Great Convergence." Leon gestured wildly at the symbols on the wall. "Their world and ours, they're bleeding together. They've been trying to come back for millennia, opening doors where the barriers are thin." We began leading him back toward the central chamber, Leon stumbling between us, still talking frantically. "They built these chambers as anchors. This door was just one of hundreds, maybe thousands across our world. They're opening with increasing frequency as the convergence approaches." Back in the central chamber, we sat Leon down while Maya fetched water from our supplies. The rest of the team gathered around, concerned by his appearance and agitated state. "Who are these architects?" I asked once he'd taken a few sips of water. Leon looked at me, his eyes suddenly clear and focused. "They existed before us. Not aliens. They were here first. Something happened. Some cosmic event that forced them to retreat to a parallel dimension, but they've been trying to return." "Return to what?" Camilla asked. "To their world, our world, Earth." Leon ran a trembling hand over his face. "They're coming back, Griffin." As Leon spoke, I noticed something troubling. The quality of light in the central chamber had changed. The structures around us seemed to move subtly, angles changing, distances between objects contracting and expanding. "We need to leave," Leon suddenly said, voice sharp with certainty. "Now. They know we're here." Maya's equipment began emitting high-pitched warnings. "Energy readings are spiking everywhere," she reported, checking her monitors. "Something's changing in the chamber's composition." I looked toward the entrance passage and felt my stomach drop. The doorway we'd come through hours earlier was narrowing, the stone edges slowly drawing together. "Everyone move!" I shouted, decision made in an instant. "Grab essential samples and documentation. We're evacuating immediately." The team moved with urgent efficiency, years of field experience kicking in. Within minutes, we had our most crucial equipment and samples packed. "Through the door, single file," I ordered, positioning myself near the exit to count each team member as they passed. "Stay together on the other side." The doorway had narrowed to about 4 feet wide by the time the last few team members squeezed through. Camilla helped Leon through, then turned back to me. "Griffin, hurry!" I grabbed the final sample case and moved toward the exit, but something made me pause and look back. In the deepest shadows of the chamber, something moved. Something massive. It moved with deliberate purpose. I couldn't make out a distinct shape, just an impression of vast size and awareness. For a brief, terrifying moment, I felt it perceive me. Not just see me, but know me. "Griffin!" Maya's voice snapped me back to reality. I squeezed through the narrowing doorway just as it closed completely behind me, sealing the impossible city away once more. The mind passage seemed unnervingly normal after what we'd experienced. "Everyone accounted for?" I asked, catching my breath. Maya nodded. "All present." The journey back through the mind tunnels passed in tense silence, each of us processing what we'd witnessed. Leon remained unusually quiet, his eyes distant as though still seeing something beyond our reality. The hotel conference room in Santiago buzzed with strained voices 12 hours later. We checked in, showered, and gathered to debrief. The argument had been ongoing for nearly an hour. "We need to report this immediately to the international scientific community," argued one of the geologists. "And tell them what exactly?" countered Maya. "That we found a city that breaks the laws of physics, inhabited by beings from another dimension? Without the door still open, we have limited physical evidence." "The samples we collected will provide some proof," Camila said, gesturing to the secure cases containing the strange materials we'd recovered. I stood by the whiteboard where I'd been charting everything we knew. "Before we decide on next steps, we need to understand what we're dealing with." Leon sat apart from the others, scribbling frantically in his notebook. He hadn't spoken much since our return, but his pen hadn't stopped moving. "What exactly did they tell you, Leon?" I asked, drawing everyone's attention to him. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot. "The architects showed me images, histories of their kind. They've been opening these doors throughout human history, testing the barriers between dimensions." "For what purpose?" Camila asked. "To return." Leon's voice was eerily calm now. "This was their world before it was ours. They're coming back to reclaim it." The room erupted in questions and objections. I raised my hands for silence. "One at a time, please. We're scientists. Let's approach this methodically." For the next several hours, we documented everything Leon could recall from his communication with the entities he called the architects. The picture that emerged was disturbing. These beings had apparently existed on Earth millions of years before humans. Some cosmic catastrophe had forced them to flee to a parallel dimension, but they'd been trying to return ever since. While the debate continued, I retreated to my room with copies of our data and my laptop. Something about Leon's description of doors opening throughout history nagged at me. I began cross-referencing our findings with historical accounts of unexplained phenomena. Patterns emerged faster than I expected. Reports of doors to nowhere, or passages that shouldn't exist, appeared across cultures and time periods. Ancient texts described world gates and beings who could bend space. More disturbing were the frequency patterns. These events had been rare in ancient times but increased steadily through the centuries. In the past 5 decades, the frequency had accelerated dramatically. A knock at my door interrupted my analysis. When I opened it, I found a man in his late 50s wearing an impeccably tailored suit. 2 younger men in dark clothing stood at a discreet distance down the hallway. "Dr. Griffin Ross?" The man extended his hand. "Thomas Crawford, Special Scientific Advisor to the United States Department of Defense. May I come in?" Something in his practiced smile put me on edge, but I stepped aside. "How did you know we were here?" Crawford entered, his eyes quickly scanning my research-covered desk. "The Chilean government notified us when your team requested permits to investigate electromagnetic anomalies in a restricted mining area. We've been monitoring similar phenomena for some time." "We?" I asked, closing the door. "Various international agencies." Crawford settled into a chair without waiting for an invitation. "Dr. Ross, I'll be direct. What your team discovered in that mine is of significant interest to multiple governments. I'm authorized to offer you substantial resources to continue your research. Equipment, facilities, personnel, funding. In exchange for exclusive access to your findings and any future discoveries related to these doors." He looked at me intently. "This isn't the first such discovery, Dr. Ross. Various governments have been aware of these phenomena for decades, though none have documented a successful entry until your team." I kept my expression neutral even though I was surprised. "And what's the government's interest in these doors, Mr. Crawford?" "Understanding them, determining if they represent opportunity or threat." He leaned forward slightly. "Your team has already proven they lead somewhere extraordinary. Imagine the scientific advancements possible if we could control and utilize these passages." Something in his emphasis on control and utilize raised alarm bells. I thought of the impossible city and the presence I'd sensed watching me. "I'll need to discuss this with my team," I said carefully. Crawford nodded, standing. "Of course. Here's my card. I'll be in Santiago for 3 more days." At the door, he paused. "One more thing, Dr. Ross. I strongly advise keeping your discoveries within appropriate channels. Public disclosure would be complicated." After he left, I sat pondering his words and the implied threat behind them. The offer of resources was tempting. We'd need significant support to continue this research properly. Yet Crawford's interest seemed focused on potential applications rather than understanding. A commotion from down the hall interrupted my thoughts. I found several team members outside Leon's room. Inside, he was pacing frantically. Furniture pushed against walls to make space for the symbols he'd drawn on dozens of papers now covering the floor. "They're still talking to me," he said when he saw me, tapping his temple. "The architects, they're showing me more." The cold spots on his skin had expanded, forming intricate patterns that matched some of the symbols from the door. His eyes were feverish, moving rapidly as though tracking invisible movement. "Leon, you need to rest," Camila said gently, approaching him with concern. "Can't rest. Not with what's coming." He grabbed my shoulders. "Griffin, they've been watching us throughout history. Every civilization that got close to understanding the doors either collapsed or buried the knowledge. They're preparing for the convergence, and we opened a door right when the cycle is accelerating." I looked at the symbols he'd drawn, recognizing patterns similar to what I'd been researching. Whatever was happening to Leon, his information aligned with the historical patterns I'd identified. "We'll figure this out, Leon," I promised. "But Crawford knows about the doors. Governments have been tracking them." "Of course they have," Leon laughed, a sound with little humor. "The architects showed me. Some tried to control the doors, weaponize them. It never ends well." I exchanged worried glances with Camila. Leon's mental state was deteriorating, yet his insights seemed too specific to dismiss as mere delusions. Later, after getting Leon to finally rest under Camila's supervision, I returned to my research. The patterns were clear now. Doors had been appearing with increasing frequency throughout history, staying open longer each time. If Leon was right, these weren't random events, but preparation for something called the Great Convergence. Crawford's offer hung over my thoughts. We needed resources, but government control of this discovery felt dangerous. Whatever these doors connected to, whatever the architects were, their technology and knowledge were far beyond our understanding. The potential for misuse was enormous. I looked at the cold spots forming on my own wrist, faint but unmistakable patterns matching symbols from the door. Something had marked us. Something had recognized us. And according to Leon, it was preparing to return. I stared at my wrist in the dim light of my Boston apartment, tracing the intricate patterns with my fingertip. The cold spots had grown more pronounced over the 3 weeks since our return from Chile. What had begun as faint discolorations now resembled frost patterns etched into my skin, forming unmistakable symbols that matched those from the door. My phone buzzed with another text from Camila. "Check your email. Sent you the latest readings." Sleep had become a luxury I could rarely afford. When exhaustion finally knocked me out, my dreams filled with twisted architecture and impossible angles, landscapes that felt both alien and strangely recognizable. The same landscapes the rest of the team reported seeing in their own sleep. I opened my laptop and clicked on Camila's email. Her message was terse. Correlation confirmed. Symptoms intensify near anomalies. The attached files contained electromagnetic readings from 3 different locations where team members had reported intensified cold spot patterns. All 3 showed similar signatures to what we'd detected in Chile, though at lower amplitudes. Camila had begun tracking these anomalies after Leon described them in one of his more lucid moments. My coffee had gone cold, like the persistent chill that seemed to radiate from the markings on my skin. I dumped it in the sink and made a fresh cup, watching steam rise as rain pattered against the kitchen window. The weather was like my mood, gray, unsettled, and threatening. I returned to my makeshift research station in the living room. Maps covered the walls, red pins marking locations of historical accounts that matched our experiences. Yellow sticky notes connected seemingly unrelated incidents across centuries and continents. What I was discovering was both fascinating and terrifying. My phone rang. Crawford. I let it go to voicemail, as I had twice already this week. His messages grew increasingly insistent about formalizing our arrangement. The pressure had started subtly after our return from Chile, but intensified after I'd requested access to historical records of similar phenomena, records that officially didn't exist. The voicemail notification blinked. I pressed play, putting it on speaker as I continued examining Camila's data. Dr. Ross, this is Thomas Crawford. I'm beginning to wonder if you're avoiding me. His voice had the same measured tone, but with an edge of impatience. My offer remains open, but not indefinitely. The resources at your disposal could accelerate your research considerably. I expect to hear from you by the end of the week. The implicit threat wasn't lost on me. Crawford wasn't accustomed to being ignored. My doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. I checked the security camera I'd installed after noticing a black sedan parked across the street for 3 consecutive days. Maya's face filled the screen, rain dripping from her hood. I buzzed her in. Even though it was early, I was glad for her company. When she reached my door, she shrugged off her wet jacket and handed me a flash drive. "The video files," she said, her expression grim. "They've been compromised." "Compromised how?" I ushered her inside, glancing down the hallway before closing the door. Maya headed straight for my computer. "I kept backups of everything we recorded in Chile. Last night I compared them to our official documentation." She plugged in the drive and opened side-by-side video files. "Watch." The left video showed our original footage of the central chamber with its impossible architecture. The right showed the same timestamp but with subtle differences. The more extreme physical impossibilities were missing, the angles less acute, and the spatial distortions less pronounced. "Someone sanitized our evidence," she said, making it look impressive but scientifically explicable. "Crawford." I said his name with distaste. Maya nodded. "Probably. But how did they access our secure servers? The same way they knew exactly when to show up in Santiago." I pulled a folder from my desk. "I've been doing some digging into similar research teams, found some disturbing patterns." I showed her newspaper clippings and printouts of academic obituaries. Dr. Eleanor Whitman, 2016, disappeared during research of electromagnetic anomalies in Siberia. Dr. James Chen, 2018, suicide after claiming government interference in his research on spatial anomalies. The Kapowski expedition, 2012. All 7 members killed in an unexplained accident after reporting unusual findings in Antarctica. Maya absorbed the information, her face hardening. "You think they eliminated research teams that found doors? Or teams that refused to cooperate?" I lowered my voice even though we were in my own apartment. "I installed signal jammers last week, but we should assume we're being monitored." She glanced toward the window. "The black sedan is back. 2 men inside. They're not subtle." I flipped through more papers. "I need everyone here tonight. Can you contact the others?" "Already done. 7 o'clock. Maya's efficiency remained her greatest asset. "Leon isn't doing well. Camila's keeping him stable. But the episodes are getting worse." I nodded, feeling worried. "And the others?" "Most are cooperating with Crawford, believing his resources are our best option. Can't blame them. The evidence keeps disappearing, making our claims sound increasingly unbelievable." She pointed to her forearm where her own cold spots had formed distinct patterns, though these are harder to explain away. Has Camila made any progress analyzing them? She says they're evolving, changing slightly each day but following patterns she can track. Maya rubbed her marked skin absently. The dreams are getting more specific too. My phone rang again. Camila this time. I answered immediately. "We need to come earlier," she said without preamble. "Leon's condition deteriorated after this morning's seismic activity in Myanmar. He's coherent now, but insistent on sharing something with everyone." "How soon can you get here?" "We're outside your building." By 6 that evening, my apartment had transformed into a command center for our fragmented team. Camila set up monitoring equipment to track Leon's neural activity while Maya secured the perimeter, disabling listening devices she discovered in my hallway. Leon sat rigid on my couch, eyes fixed on distant visions only he could see. The patterns on his skin had spread further than anyone else's, covering most of his visible forearms and extending up his neck. The mathematical precision of the symbols made them beautiful in a disturbing way. Camila approached me with her tablet. His brain activity patterns match what I recorded in Chile, but significantly stronger. She lowered her voice. "Griffin, I'm worried. His physiology is changing in ways I can't explain." Before I could respond, I heard a knock at the door. Dr. Theo Wright had arrived. I'd reached out to him after reading his papers on multidimensional space. He'd been skeptical until I showed him our unaltered footage and the marks on my skin. "Sorry I'm late," Theo said, shaking rain from his coat. "I think I was followed here." "Crawford's people," Maya confirmed from the window. "They're maintaining their distance." Theo noticed Leon and hesitated. "Is he all right?" "Define all right," Camila replied with strained humor. "His connection to whatever we encountered in Chile is intensifying. Physiologically, he's undergoing changes we don't understand." Theo approached Leon cautiously. "Dr. Mercer, I'm Theo Wright. I've been analyzing the spatial anomalies your team documented." Leon's eyes suddenly focused, locking onto Theo with unnerving intensity. "You understand the mathematics." "I'm trying to," Theo admitted, settling into a chair across from him. "The symbols are equations," Leon said, his voice steadier than I'd heard in days. "Not just symbols. They're formulas for folding space." Theo leaned forward, interest piqued. "Folding space? You mean like theoretical wormholes?" No. Leon shook his head impatiently. "More fundamental. They don't create passages through space. They alter the fundamental properties of space itself." As their discussion deepened into theoretical physics beyond my expertise, I pulled Camila aside. "What triggered this episode?" "There was seismic activity near Myanmar this morning. Barely registered on standard equipment, but my modified sensors detected the same electromagnetic signature as Chile." She showed me the readings. Within minutes, Leon began having convulsions. "Any other locations showing similar patterns?" "Several, but most are minor." She scrolled through data points. "I've been tracking them against historical records of unexplained phenomena. The correlations are significant." Our conversation halted when Leon suddenly stood, moving with unexpected steadiness toward my whiteboard. He grabbed a marker and began drawing symbols with frantic precision. "They're showing me again," he muttered, hands moving with mechanical accuracy. "The pattern is accelerating." We watched in stunned silence as intricate symbols filled the board, some matching those from the door, others entirely new. His movements became increasingly erratic until he suddenly collapsed, markers still clutched in his hand. "Leon!" Camila rushed to his side as convulsions racked his body. Maya helped move him to the couch while Camila administered medication from her medical bag. His seizure subsided gradually, leaving him exhausted but conscious. "Water," he croaked. I brought him a glass, which he drained in long gulps. When he finished, his eyes were clearer than they'd been in weeks. "I can explain now," he said, gesturing toward the whiteboard. "They showed me everything." We gathered around as Leon spoke with unsettling lucidity. "The architects have been intersecting with humanity throughout our entire history," he began. "The doors appear during cycles, opening more frequently as the convergence approaches. Humans who encountered them interpreted what they saw according to their understanding. Ancient gods, I suggested, thinking of my research. Leon nodded. Gods, spirits, demons, all attempts to categorize beings whose nature existed beyond human comprehension. But some cultures understood more than others. They learned to recognize the signs. He pointed to several specific symbols on the board. These appear in ancient Sumerian texts, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and even indigenous Australian rock art, separated by thousands of miles and years. Not because of cultural exchange, because they all encountered the same entities. And documented the same mathematical principles, Theo added, studying the symbols with growing excitement. These structures here, they're consistent with advanced topological models of space-time. The architects showed me locations, Leon continued. Places where the barriers between dimensions are thinnest. Sites where doors have opened repeatedly throughout history. I quickly thought about the maps on my walls. That's why certain locations appear repeatedly in myths about entrances to other worlds. Exactly. Leon's voice strengthened with conviction. Egypt, Peru, Greece, China, Mesopotamia, all cultures with advanced understanding of astronomy and mathematics, all with myths about gods or beings who emerged from doorways or gateways. The world gates, I murmured, remembering the phrase I'd found repeated across disparate historical texts. Yes, and those who wait beyond, Leon finished. The architects themselves. We all felt the weight of the implications. If Leon was right, if these entities had been interacting with humanity throughout our history, everything we thought we knew about human development might be wrong. Why now? Maya asked what we were all wondering. Why is this convergence happening in our lifetime? Leon's expression darkened. It's cyclical. They've attempted returns before, but conditions weren't right. Now something's changed. The barriers are thinning naturally. Or artificially, Theo suggested. Our own technologies might be affecting dimensional stability without our knowledge. Before we could explore this further, my phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. Dinner, Chez Henri, 9 p.m. Come alone, Crawford. I showed it to Maya, whose expression turned serious. It's not a request. No, I agreed. But it might be an opportunity to learn what he really wants. It's dangerous, Camila warned. More dangerous than being unprepared for whatever's coming, I countered. I made my decision as I looked around the room, at Leon's marked skin, at the symbols that matched ancient texts from across the world, at the data showing increasing anomalies globally. Crawford knew more than he was sharing, and I needed that information. I'll go, I decided. The rest of you should continue working. Theo, can you make sense of these symbols? See if they correlate with specific locations? He nodded, already taking photos of the whiteboard with his phone. I'll cross-reference them with known dimensional anomalies in physics literature. Camilla, keep monitoring the seismic patterns. Maya, we need secure communications, something Crawford's people can't easily access. Maya smiled thinly. Already working on it. I've established encryption protocols based on the door symbols themselves. Figured if anyone tried to crack it, they'd have to understand the mathematics first. As they set to work, I retreated to my bedroom to change for dinner, worried about the decisions I'd need to make. In the mirror, I examined the patterns on my skin that had spread from my wrist to my forearm. They seemed to pulse slightly in the dim light, a constant reminder of our connection to something beyond understanding. Chez Henri occupied a discreet corner in Back Bay. I arrived 10 minutes early, but was unsurprised to find Crawford already seated at a private table in the rear, a glass of scotch in hand. Dr. Ross, he greeted me with practiced warmth. I'm pleased you accepted my invitation. Your persistence is difficult to ignore, I replied, taking the offered seat. A waiter quickly brought a second scotch and discreetly left. Crawford studied me over the rim of his glass. You look tired, Griffin. Discovery taking its toll, isn't it? I looked at him directly, especially when evidence keeps disappearing. If my accusation surprised him, he didn't show it. Science requires verification. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary proof. Hard to provide proof when someone sanitizes our video footage. Crawford sighed as though disappointed. Conspiracy theories don't become you, Doctor. Technical glitches are common with advanced equipment in unusual environments. The conversation continued like this through appetizers, Crawford offering vague reassurances while I probed for concrete information. By the main course, I was losing patience. Why don't we stop pretending? I set down my fork. You know exactly what we found in Chile. You know it wasn't the first door, and you know about the physical changes affecting my team. Crawford's expression changed slightly, calculation replacing friendliness in his eyes. Very well. Direct questions deserve direct answers. He dabbed his lips with his napkin. Yes, we know about the doors. We've been monitoring them for decades. And yes, we've observed the physiological changes in previous research teams. Previous teams that conveniently disappeared. Some cooperated, others complicated matters unnecessarily. His tone remained conversational, making his implied threat all the more chilling. Dr. Whitman's curiosity exceeded her discretion. Dr. Chen became unstable, a danger to himself and others. My suspicions confirmed, I kept my expression neutral while feeling angry. And what happened to the Kapowski expedition? A genuine tragedy. They attempted to use technology to force a door open wider than natural parameters allowed. Crawford shrugged slightly. The results were catastrophic. What do you really want from my team, Crawford? His eyes shone with sudden intensity. Think of the strategic implications, Griffin. Doors to spaces that defy our physical laws. Technology that manipulates the fundamental properties of reality itself. He leaned forward. Imagine weaponizing that capability. Soldiers who could appear anywhere instantly, materials with properties beyond our current understanding, and energy sources beyond calculation. You want to weaponize the doors. The truth was both obvious and appalling. I want to ensure national security in a world where these doors exist, he corrected smoothly. If we don't master this technology, our adversaries eventually will. You have no idea what you're dealing with, I said, thinking of Leon's seizures and the entities he called the architects. These aren't just scientific curiosities. There's something on the other side. Something intelligent. Crawford's smile never reached his eyes. All the more reason to establish control now, before the situation evolves beyond our management. Dessert arrived, neither of us touching it as the conversation continued. Your team's physical changes are consistent with previous cases, Crawford said. The patterns, the dreams, all documented responses to exposure. What interests me most is Mercer's accelerated condition. I felt a cold shock. Even with our precautions, he knew about Leon's deterioration. His neural patterns show unprecedented integration with the door's electromagnetic signature, Crawford continued. He's becoming a valuable asset. He's a human being, I snapped, not an asset. He's becoming something else entirely, Crawford countered. And you know it. The check arrived, Crawford signing it without looking at the amount. As we stood to leave, he placed a hand on my shoulder. I respect your expertise, Griffin. That's why I'm offering cooperation rather than simply taking control of your research. But make no mistake, these phenomena are matters of national security. One way or another, we will maintain oversight. Outside, rain had given way to thick fog around the street lamps. Crawford's driver waited at the curb with an umbrella. Consider my offer, Crawford said as we parted. Full resources, protection from international interference, the chance to continue your work with adequate support. The alternative would be regrettable. I watched his car vanish into the fog before heading toward the subway, thinking quickly. Crawford had just confirmed what I feared while revealing vulnerabilities in his own position. He needed us, needed our first-hand experience and Leon's connection to the architects. That gave us leverage, however slight. My phone vibrated with a text from Maya. Security compromised. New location established. Check email for coordinates. I made my decision as I walked. Crawford and whatever government agencies he represented couldn't be trusted with this discovery. The military applications he envisioned would not only be dangerous, but potentially catastrophic if the architects were as powerful as they seemed. I needed to assemble a team I could trust, researchers who understood the gravity of what we'd discovered and would prioritize understanding over exploitation. Camila, Maya, Leon, and Theo Wright would be essential to comprehend the mathematical principles behind the doors. The cold spots on my arm seemed to pulse as fog swirled around me. Whatever was happening, whatever the architects wanted, Crawford's approach would only escalate the danger. We needed to understand, not control. To communicate, not weaponize. By the time I reached my apartment building, I had mentally mapped our next steps. I would need to access my emergency funds, establish secure communications, and arrange discreet transportation. Most of my research would need to be relocated to wherever Maya had established our new base of operations. As I approached my building, I noticed the black sedan was gone for the first time in days. Its absence was more concerning than its presence had been. Something had changed in Crawford's calculation. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, caution guiding my movements. When I reached my apartment door, I found it slightly ajar. Exactly how Maya would have left it as a signal if she'd evacuated under duress. Inside, the apartment was empty. My research remained on the walls, but Camila's monitoring equipment and Leon's medications were gone. Maya had implemented our contingency plan, removing the most critical people and equipment while leaving enough behind to maintain appearances. On my laptop, I found encrypted coordinates embedded in an email that appeared to be a routine academic correspondence. Dr. Wright owned a lake house in Vermont, isolated enough for privacy but connected enough for continued research. I began packing only essentials, already thinking about our next phase of investigation. The patterns on our skin, the shared dreams, and the historical connections were all connected throughout human history. If Leon was right, the doors had influenced our development for millennia, and now something was changing. The Great Convergence was approaching, and we needed to understand it before Crawford and his kind attempted to control forces beyond their comprehension, before the architects reclaimed whatever they believed was theirs. The message read, "Trust only those who bear the marks." I stared at my phone. The words confirmed what I already knew. Crawford would stop at nothing to control what we'd discovered. I traced the patterns on my forearm that had spread since Chile. The cold spots no longer felt alien, but like some type of communication, a language written on skin instead of paper. Whatever the architects were trying to tell us, they'd chosen 5 of us to receive their message. The lake appeared through the trees as my rental car rounded the final bend. Theo's Vermont property was between pine forests and water, its isolation perfect for our needs. The 2-story cabin with its weathered wood exterior looked more like a vacation home than a research facility, precisely why it would escape notice. I parked beside Maya's nondescript sedan and grabbed my bags from the trunk. The morning air carried the sharp scent of pine and the distant call of loons across the water. Under different circumstances, this might have been a peaceful retreat. The front door opened before I reached it. Theo's tall, lanky frame filled the doorway. "Griffin, good. You're the last to arrive." He ushered me inside with nervous energy. "We've set up in the basement. More space, fewer windows." I followed him through a living room that had been transformed. Maps covered walls, computer equipment ran on every available surface, and boxes of research materials created makeshift pathways between workstations. "How's the signal out here?" I asked, noting the satellite dishes visible through the window. "Maya modified everything. Says we're ghosts on the grid now." Theo led me down wooden stairs to a finished basement twice the size of the floor above. The space had clearly been designed as a workshop. High ceilings, concrete floors, workbenches along the walls. Now it served as our war room. Camila had established a medical area in one corner where Leon sat connected to monitoring equipment. Maya worked at a station surrounded by electronics, her fingers flying across multiple keyboards. "Look who finally made it," she called without looking up. Camila approached, clipboard in hand. "Let me see your arm." I rolled up my sleeve, revealing the patterns that had spread past my elbow. She examined them clinically, photographing and measuring before making notes. "The progression is consistent with what we're all experiencing," she said, though not as advanced as Leon's. Leon noticed me from his corner and raised a hand in greeting. His skin markings now covered both arms entirely and climbed up his neck to his jawline. Even though the markings had spread so far, he looked more lucid than I'd seen him in weeks. "They know we're here," he said simply. "The architects, they approve." I moved through the space, taking in our makeshift command center. "You've accomplished a lot in 3 days." "Had to," Maya replied. "Crawford's people searched your apartment the day after you left, found the dummy research I planted." "Which buys us time, but not much," Theo added. "They'll figure out its misdirection eventually." I set my bags down and pulled out my laptop. "What have we learned so far?" Camila took the lead, gesturing toward a large digital display. "I've been tracking seismic anomalies globally, looking for patterns that match what we saw in Chile." The screen showed a world map dotted with color-coded markers, each representing different types of geological events. "Standard earthquakes appear in blue," she explained, "but these red markers indicate events with the same electromagnetic signature we documented at the door site." I studied the pattern. "They're clustered." "Exactly. Most significantly here," she zoomed in on Egypt, "around Alexandria. The frequency has increased dramatically over the past week." "Leon predicted this," I noted, "before we left Boston." Leon nodded from his monitoring station. "The patterns told me. Alexandria sits on a thin point between dimensions, a place where doors have opened repeatedly throughout history." Maya joined us at the display. "I've been digging through historical records of Alexandria. The ancient library wasn't destroyed just by fire. There are accounts of earth tremors and strange lights during the final destruction. Similar phenomena appear in Egyptian hieroglyphics," Theo added. "I've been cross-referencing with Griffin's research on world gates." I moved to a table covered with printouts of ancient texts and symbols. My research from Boston had expanded significantly with Theo's contributions. "The Egyptians documented these entities more precisely than other ancient cultures," I said, picking up a reproduction of a papyrus fragment. "Their hieroglyphs for certain deities contain symbols identical to what we saw on the door." "Not surprising," Leon interjected, his voice stronger. "The architects spoke directly to them and taught them. The pyramids aren't just tombs, they're markers." We'd grown accustomed to Leon's cryptic statements, treating them as research leads rather than delusions. Too many had proven accurate to dismiss. "Markers for what?" I asked. "Door locations and astronomical alignments. The Egyptians understood the cycles better than most." Theo approached with his tablet. "Which brings me to this." He pulled up schematics for a device that resembled a complex seismograph. "I'm calling it a threshold detector. It measures subtle gravitational anomalies that precede door appearances." Maya scoffed lightly. "He's being modest. It also creates three-dimensional mapping of spatial distortions and can theoretically predict door stability." "If it works," Theo qualified. "We need to test it against actual data," I said. "How soon can we be ready to move to Alexandria?" 3 days, Maya answered immediately. "I've secured credentials identifying us as members of an international geological survey team. Good enough to access restricted sites without raising immediate flags. And our equipment? Packed to look like standard survey gear. I've created a secure communication system using frequencies that should be invisible to standard monitoring." I nodded, impressed by their efficiency. "What about you, Leon? Are you fit to travel?" Camilla answered before he could. His physical condition is stable enough, but the episodes are becoming more frequent and intense. I have to go, Leon insisted, disconnecting sensors from his arms. They're showing me what to look for. The patterns are coordinates, Griffin. His words caught my attention. Coordinates? Like latitude and longitude? Not exactly. More like reference points. Places where reality is thin. He gestured to his marked skin. Each pattern corresponds to a specific location where doors have appeared throughout history. I looked down at my own arm. You're saying our marks are some kind of map? Yes, Leon's eyes brightened with excitement. That's why they're different for each of us. Together, they form a complete picture. The idea struck me as simultaneously absurd and completely logical. I turned to Camilla. Have you documented all our marking patterns? Of course. She moved to her workstation and pulled up digital scans of each team member's skin markings. I've been tracking the progression daily. Put them together, I suggested. Overlay them and see if there's a pattern. Camilla worked quickly, manipulating the images on her screen. She arranged them in different configurations until suddenly stopping. Look at this. She projected the combined image onto the large display. When overlaid properly, our 5 sets of markings created an unmistakable pattern, a map of sorts, with intricate connections between specific points. One location glowed more prominently than the others. Alexandria, Leon whispered, looking at the display. The next door will open there. Maya whispered a curse under her breath. They've been marking us as their messengers, or their tools, Theo suggested. I studied the composite image, recognizing other locations from my research. These match historical sites associated with so-called world gates: Göbekli Tepe, Angkor Wat, Teotihuacan, Mohenjo-Daro, all places where ancient civilizations achieved remarkable technological and astronomical knowledge seemingly overnight, Theo noted. A chill ran through me as the implications settled. The architects have been influencing human development for thousands of years, using these doors as contact points. And now the doors are opening with increasing frequency, Camilla added, leading to what Leon calls the Great Convergence. We fell silent, each absorbing the weight of our discovery. The markings on our skin weren't just symptoms of exposure. They were deliberate communications, a living map to locations where dimensions intersected. How much time do we have? I finally asked. Leon closed his eyes as if listening to distant voices. Days, maybe a week before the Alexandria door fully manifests. Then we leave tomorrow, I decided. No point waiting 3 days if Crawford's people are already searching. Maya nodded. I'll accelerate our departure plans. We should take separate routes to avoid detection. I can have the threshold detector ready by morning, Theo said, already moving toward his workbench. Camilla began organizing her medical supplies. I'll prepare medication protocols for Leon during travel. As they dispersed to their tasks, I pulled Leon aside. Are you sure you're strong enough for this? His eyes found mine, clearer than they'd been in weeks, even though the markings had spread across his skin. I don't have a choice, Griffin. None of us do. We've been chosen as witnesses. Witnesses to what? Their return. A shadow crossed his face. The architects have been patient for millennia, but that patience is ending. Before I could ask more, the security system Maya had installed chimed softly. She rushed to her monitors. Vehicle approaching, she reported, pulling up camera feeds. Black SUV, government plates. My heart sank. Crawford. Maybe not Crawford himself, but definitely his people, Maya confirmed. 2 miles out and approaching slowly. How did they find us? Camilla asked, already packing essential equipment. Probably followed one of us, Theo suggested, grabbing his prototype detector. Or they're checking properties registered to anyone connected to Griffin. I made a quick decision. Accelerate everything. We leave now, not tomorrow. Maya, wipe the systems after you've backed up our data. Camila, get Leon ready for travel. What about everything we can't take? Theo asked, gesturing to the research covering the walls. Leave it. Take photos of anything critical, but don't risk capture for equipment we can replace. We moved with practiced efficiency, each grabbing predetermined essentials. Maya had prepared go bags for everyone containing passports, credentials, and emergency cash. Theo dismantled his prototype and packed it into a specialized case. 1 minute until they reached the property line, Maya warned, fingers flying over keyboards as she initiated remote data wipes. I helped Camila with Leon, who moved with surprising steadiness, even though his condition was serious. Where should we meet? I asked the room. Hotel Cecil, Alexandria, Maya answered. Old building, minimal security cameras, cash payments accepted. I've booked rooms under our survey team aliases. The security system chimed again, more urgently this time. They've stopped at the gate, Maya reported. 2 men exiting the vehicle. Exit strategy beta, I ordered, using the protocol we'd established. 30-second intervals, alternate transportation as planned. Maya nodded, grabbing her backpack and a hard drive. See you in Alexandria. She disappeared through a concealed door that led to an underground passage Theo had shown us upon arrival. 30 seconds later, Camila and Leon followed the same route. Theo went next, carrying his prototype and essential research data. I took a final look at our abandoned command center. 3 days of intensive work, and we were leaving most of it behind. I grabbed my own bag and the composite map of our skin markings before following the others through the hidden passage. The tunnel stretched about 50 yards, emerging in a boathouse at the lake's edge. I could hear engines starting as I emerged, the others taking the boats we'd prepared as alternate escape vehicles. My own transportation waited at the end of the dock, a small motorboat with supplies already stowed. I cast off quickly, steering toward the opposite shore where Maya had arranged for vehicles to be waiting. As I crossed the lake, I glanced back at Theo's property. 2 men in dark suits stood on the main dock, watching our escape without attempting pursuit. They weren't trying to stop us. They were confirming our location for Crawford. I turned away, focusing on the approaching shoreline. The markings on my arm seemed to pulse slightly, as if responding to our movement toward Alexandria. The cold spots that had once frightened me now felt like a strange type of guidance. We were headed toward a door that connected to beings who had influenced human history for millennia. Beings who were planning a return to our world. Crawford wanted to weaponize that connection. We needed to understand it first. As I reached the far shore, I spotted the sedan Maya had arranged. The key waited under the front wheel as planned. I transferred my equipment from the boat and began the drive that would eventually take me to the airport. The Egyptian morning heat hit me as I stepped out of the car onto Rue Missoula. Hotel Cecil stood before me, its faded colonial architecture a stark contrast to the modern buildings surrounding it. I pulled my cap lower over my eyes and scanned the street for surveillance before entering the lobby. Maya's choice made sense as soon as I walked in. High ceilings, worn furnishings, and most importantly, a distinct lack of security cameras. The kind of place where they accepted cash without asking questions. I approached the front desk where an older Egyptian man looked up with mild interest. Reservation for Miller. James Miller, I said, using the alias Maya had arranged. The clerk checked his book without touching a computer. Ah, yes. Your colleagues arrived yesterday. Room 312. He handed me a heavy brass key. 3rd floor. I thanked him and took the stairs rather than the ancient elevator. The marks on my arm tingled as I climbed, the cold spots seeming to pulse with proximity to something in the city. By the time I reached the 3rd floor, the sensation had intensified. I knocked on the door with the agreed pattern. 2 quick taps. Pause. 3 slow. Maya opened it immediately, her expression relaxing when she saw me. About time, she said, pulling me inside quickly. We were getting worried. The suite had been transformed into another command center, with equipment covering every available surface. Maps of Alexandria marked with red circles dominated one wall. Camila sat at a makeshift desk analyzing data on her laptop while Theo worked on assembling his threshold detector in the corner. Leon stood at the window, staring at the Mediterranean Sea. The markings on his skin had spread further, now visible above his collar and creeping toward his temples. Even with this progression, he looked more focused than I'd seen him in weeks. "Any trouble getting here?" Camila asked, looking up from her work. I set down my bag. "Changed planes twice, used cash only. No signs of surveillance." "Good," Maya said. "Crawford's people searched the house about 15 minutes after we left. They've been checking flights to Egypt since then. But they don't know exactly where in Alexandria we're headed," Theo added, adjusting something in his device. "That gives us a small advantage." I moved to the maps. "What have we found so far?" Camila joined me. The combined markings led us to several potential sites. I've been tracking seismic activity at each location. She pointed to one circle glowing brighter than the others. "This area shows the strongest electromagnetic signature. Similar to Chile, but growing stronger by the hour." "Com el Dica," Leon said, still facing the window. "The ancient theater district. That's where the door is forming." I studied the map. "That's a major archaeological site. It'll be monitored, tourists everywhere." "Not the section we need," Maya replied. "There's an unexcavated area that was recently closed due to structural concerns. My sources say those concerns appeared suddenly 3 weeks ago." "When the electromagnetic signature began increasing," Camila confirmed. I felt the usual mixture of dread and excitement building. "How soon can we access the site?" "Tonight," Maya said. "I've created credentials identifying us as specialists called in to assess the structural issues. Egyptian authorities approved our request yesterday." I nodded, impressed again by her efficiency. "And Theo's detector?" "Almost operational," he answered, connecting wires to a portable power source. "It should detect spatial anomalies within a 100-meter radius once we're on site." "What about Crawford?" I asked, turning to Maya. She brought up images on her laptop. "My monitoring program caught these at Cairo International yesterday." The security footage showed 2 men I recognized from Theo's lake house passing through customs. "They're in country but still checking larger sites," Maya continued. "They don't know about Com el Dica yet. That gives us maybe 12 hours before they connect the dots." I processed this information quickly. "Then we need to move faster. What about the museum archives?" "Scheduled for this afternoon," Camila replied. "I've arranged access under the pretense of researching historical seismic events in the region." "Good." I rubbed the markings on my arm absently. They felt colder than before, almost painful. "We need to understand what we're dealing with before the door fully manifests." Leon turned from the window suddenly. "They're getting louder," he said, his voice strained. "The architects, they know we're close." "Oh. What are they telling you?" I asked gently. "Fragments, images." He closed his eyes. "They've been here before, many times. Alexandria was special to them." "The ancient library," Theo suggested. "Some historians believe it contained knowledge far beyond what we typically attribute to that era." "Knowledge they provided," Leon whispered, "before it burned." We spent the next hour reviewing our plan. Maya distributed communication devices and emergency protocols while Camila prepared monitoring equipment for Leon's increasingly frequent episodes. By noon, we were ready for our first excursion. "Camila and I will take the museum archives," I decided. "Maya, you and Theo start preliminary scans at Com el Dica. Stay at the perimeter, nothing that might draw attention." "What about me?" Leon asked. Camila gave me a concerned look. "His condition." "I know." I turned to Leon. "You'll come with Camila and me. The archives might trigger useful connections." He nodded, seemingly relieved not to be left behind. We separated outside the hotel, taking different routes to avoid being tracked together. Camila, Leon, and I walked through the bustling streets toward the modern Alexandria Library complex, that housed much of the historical archive materials saved from the ancient collection. The library's sleek, modern architecture contrasted sharply with the ancient knowledge it contained. Our credentials got us through security with minimal questions, and soon we were escorted to the restricted archives section. "Your research area is prepared, Dr. Hartman," the curator said, using Camilla's alias. "The seismic record collections you requested are on the main table. Please inform staff if you require additional materials." Camilla thanked him professionally, and once he left, we quickly got to work. I began examining ancient maps while Camilla reviewed seismic records dating back centuries. Leon moved slowly among the shelves, his hands occasionally reaching out to touch certain scrolls as if drawn to them. "Here," he said suddenly, pulling a fragile papyrus fragment from a collection. "This one." I joined him, examining the ancient hieroglyphs carefully. My breath caught as I recognized symbols identical to those on the door in Chile. "That's impossible," I whispered, comparing the patterns to photos on my phone. "These are exact matches, but this papyrus is over 3,000 years old." "Not impossible," Leon murmured. "Expected. They've been guiding humanity for millennia." Camilla documented the fragment with her specialized camera. "There's more here," she said, pulling additional scrolls from the same collection. "These appear to be instructional texts of some kind." We spent the next hour photographing and translating what we could. The hieroglyphs described entities called the Shapers of Gates, who emerged from doors between worlds to share knowledge with chosen scribes. The texts referred to rituals that could call forth the doors at specific astronomical alignments. "This confirms what we suspected," I said, carefully returning a fragile scroll to its protective case. Ancient cultures didn't just encounter these phenomena, they learned to predict them. "And potentially control them," Camilla added. Leon had grown increasingly agitated as we worked, his fingers tracing the cold patterns on his skin. "There's more," he insisted. "Something hidden. The real knowledge wasn't kept here." "Where then?" I asked. Before he could answer, my phone vibrated with a message from Maya. "Site shows strong readings. Found something you need to see. Meet at Hotel ASAP." We thanked the archive staff and left quickly, but not before Camilla noticed a reference card mentioning ritual tablets relocated to Preservation Vault sub-basement, restricted access. "That's what we need," Leon said with certainty when she showed us. "The tablets contain the ritual." Back at the hotel, Maya and Theo waited with new findings that confirmed our suspicions. Theo's detector had registered massive spatial anomalies beneath Com El Dica. "The readings are off the charts," Theo explained, showing us the data. "Similar to Chile, but significantly stronger. Whatever door is forming there, it's much larger." "And we found this," Maya added, pulling out her phone to show us a photograph of what appeared to be a small section of wall with hieroglyphs matching our skin markings. "Where exactly?" I asked. "An overlooked section near the Roman theater, barely visible unless you know what you're looking for." I shared our findings from the archives, including the reference to tablets in the restricted sub-basement. "We need those tablets," I decided. "Maya, how difficult would it be to access the preservation vault?" She considered for a moment. "Standard electronic security, probably some physical barriers. Nothing impossible." "Tonight then," I said, after we checked the site at Com El Dica. We spent the afternoon preparing, studying the hieroglyphs we'd documented and correlating them with our skin markings. As evening approached, we headed to the archaeological site, our credentials gaining us access to the closed section without difficulty. The ancient Roman theater stood impressively in the fading light, its semicircular structure a testament to engineering that had survived millennia. Maya led us past the main excavation to a cordoned area marked with warning signs in Arabic and English. "This way," she whispered, ducking under the barrier. We followed her through partially excavated chambers until we reached a section of wall bearing the symbols Maya had photographed. Up close, they were unmistakable, identical to those from the door in Chile. Theo activated his detector, which immediately began emitting a steady pulsing tone. "Strong readings," he confirmed. "There's definitely a spatial anomaly behind this wall." Leon approached the wall slowly, seemingly pulled toward it. When he placed his palm against the symbols, they glowed faintly in response. The markings on his skin pulsed with the same blue luminescence. "There's a passage," he said, pressing different sections of the wall, "a way down to the catacombs beneath the theater." As if responding to his touch, a section of the wall moved slightly, revealing a narrow opening. Cool air rushed out, carrying the scent of ancient stone and something else, the same metallic tang I remembered from Chile. "We should document this before proceeding further," Camila said, readying her equipment. "No time," Leon insisted, already moving toward the opening. "The door is forming rapidly. We need the tablets first." I made a quick decision. "Theo, stay here with Leon. Begin scanning and document everything. Maya, Camila, and I will get the tablets from the library." Leon looked ready to protest, but Theo placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "We'll learn more by monitoring the formation process. Griffin's right. We left them with communications equipment and promised to return within 3 hours. The drive to the library was tense, each of us lost in thoughts of what we might find when we returned to the site. "The building closes to visitors at 9, Maya said as we approached the massive modern complex. "Security does rounds every 30 minutes after that." "How do we get in?" I asked. She smiled thinly. "Service entrance. I obtained credentials this morning identifying us as preservation specialists working on an urgent project." Her plan worked perfectly. We passed through service areas with minimal scrutiny, using maintenance elevators to avoid the main security desk. Maya disabled 2 security cameras along our route using a device she'd constructed from our hotel room electronics. The preservation vault was exactly where the reference card had indicated, 2 levels below the main archive in a temperature-controlled environment. The electronic lock surrendered to Maya's expertise in under a minute. "That was too easy," she muttered as the heavy door swung open. Inside, the vault contained thousands of artifacts arranged in meticulous preservation cases. Finding the tablets would be extremely difficult among so many items. "Look for anything related to astronomical alignments or ritualistic practices," I suggested. We separated to cover more ground, moving methodically through the collection. After 20 minutes, Camila called us over. "Here," she said, pointing to a sealed case containing 5 stone tablets. The preservation tag identified them as ritual tablets, unknown origin, recovered from Alexandria Harbor 1927. The symbols carved into the tablets matched those on our skin perfectly. "These are what we need," I said with certainty. "Maya, can we remove them without setting off alarms?" She studied the case. "Yes, but we'll need to replace them with something of similar weight." Using techniques that spoke of experience I chose not to question, Maya bypassed the case's security system. We carefully removed the tablets, replacing them with weighted archival boxes Camila had found nearby. "Security will be making rounds soon," Maya warned, checking her watch. "We should go. We retraced our steps, tablets carefully packed in Camila's bag. We had almost reached the service entrance when voices echoed from the corridor ahead. "Guards," Maya whispered, pulling us into a darkened office. Through the crack in the door, I saw 2 security guards walking slowly in our direction, flashlights sweeping methodically. "They're checking every room," Camila whispered. "The window," I suggested, noticing it opened onto a narrow ledge. We slipped outside just as the guards entered the office, Maya closing the window silently behind us. The ledge circled the building, eventually connecting to a maintenance ladder that brought us to ground level undetected. "That was close," Camila said as we hurried back to our vehicle. "Too close," I agreed. "Crawford's people might have alerted security to watch for us." We drove back to Com El Dica with the tablet secured, checking repeatedly for anyone following. The site remained quiet when we returned, the excavation deserted save for a single security guard who barely glanced at our credentials. We found Theo and Leon in the chamber with the hieroglyphs, both looking shaken. The wall opening had expanded significantly during our absence, now revealing a dark passage sloping downward. "What happened?" I asked, noting Theo's troubled expression. "The door is forming faster than we anticipated," he replied, showing me readings from his detector. "And Leon had another episode while you were gone." Leon sat on a stone block, his skin markings glowing faintly in the dim light. "I saw them," he said, voice hollow. "The architects. They showed me the catacombs. We found the tablets," Camilla told them, carefully unwrapping her bag. The 5 stone tablets were covered with intricate carvings, hieroglyphs interspersed with the now recognizable door symbols. Theo examined them with growing excitement. "These are instructions," he said. "Mathematical formulas combined with ritual elements. The ancient Egyptians created a method for controlling door manifestations." "Controlling them how?" I asked. "Stabilizing them, directing where they open." He traced the symbols with his finger. "These equations describe spatial manipulation principles thousands of years beyond what should have been possible for that civilization." "Unless they had help," Maya suggested. Leon stood suddenly. "We need to go down. Now." The door is almost fully formed. I glanced at each team member, receiving nods of agreement. "Stay together. Document everything. If anyone feels sudden disorientation, speak up immediately." We activated our lights and entered the passage, descending into Alexandria's ancient depths. The air grew colder and more damp as we walked, with that distinctive metallic scent. The walls changed from worked stone to older construction, finally giving way to crude passages that predated Roman occupation. Theo's detector emitted increasingly urgent signals as we advanced. "The spatial anomalies are growing stronger. We're getting close." After 20 minutes of careful descent, the passage opened into a vast subterranean chamber that took my breath away. Ancient columns rose to support a ceiling lost in darkness above. The floor featured an intricate mosaic depicting star patterns and symbols matching those on the tablets. And on the far wall, unmistakable in its geometric precision, was a door, identical in design to the one in Chile but significantly larger. It pulsed with blue luminescence, the symbols around its edges moving slightly as we watched. "It's not fully manifested yet," Theo said, checking his readings. "Still in formation." Leon moved toward it as if in a trance. The markings on his skin glowed in response to the door's pulsing light. "We need to perform the ritual before it stabilizes completely," he said, "before they can control the opening." "Who is they?" Maya asked, tension evident in her voice. "The architects," Leon replied, "and Crawford, if he finds this place. The ritual might allow us to communicate with them on our terms." I studied the tablets Camilla had laid out on a flat stone. "How do we do this?" Theo pointed to the mosaic floor. The tablets describe standing positions, 5 people at specific points in the pattern, reciting these formulas while visualizing the symbols. "It's not magic," Camilla said, noting my skepticism. "From what I can tell, it's a mathematical approach to creating resonance with the door's electromagnetic fields." We took our positions as indicated on the tablets, forming a pentagon around the central mosaic star pattern. Each of us held a tablet corresponding to our position. "Recite the symbols in sequence," Theo instructed. "Concentrate on the patterns on your skin as you do." I began reading the strange symbols aloud, my voice echoing in the ancient chamber. The others joined in, our voices overlapping in a dissonant chorus. The cold spots on my skin began to burn as the door's pulsing intensified. The air in the chamber thickened, pressure building in my ears. The door symbols glowed brighter. Suddenly, the door's pulsing synchronized with our bodies. I could feel it resonating through my chest. The symbols we were reciting appeared in glowing blue light, floating in the air between us. Then, instead of opening as we expected, the door's surface rippled in a fluid motion. An image formed within it, not an opening to another place, but a projection. Beings of impossible geometry appeared, their shapes changing constantly, impossible to focus on directly. They seemed made of light and shadow simultaneously, their movements fluid yet precise. "The architects," Leon whispered, lowering his tablet. A voice filled my mind, not heard with my ears, but felt throughout my body. It spoke in concepts rather than words, each idea unfolding with complex implications. "You have called us as the ancients once did," the voice conveyed. "You bear our signs. You have opened our doors." "Who are you?" I asked aloud, uncertain if speech was necessary. "We are the first ones," came the reply. "This world was ours before yours. We walked these lands when your kind were but simple creatures in the forests." Images flooded my mind, Earth as it existed millions of years ago. Vast cities of impossible architecture rising from primordial landscapes. Beings like those projected in the door moving through these structures, manipulating reality itself. "What happened to you?" Camila asked, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. "The great calamity came, a cosmic alignment that tore the fabric between dimensions. We could not survive in this reality when it changed, so we created the doors, passages to a parallel dimension where we could continue our existence. More images, stars aligning, massive energies tearing through Earth's atmosphere, the first ones fleeing through doors similar to the one before us. But we never abandoned this world," the voice continued. "It was always our intention to return when the cosmic alignment reversed. We left markers, seeds of knowledge with primitive humans who showed potential. We guided their development through the doors when conditions allowed brief connections. The ancient civilizations," Theo murmured. "Egypt, Sumer, China, Maya. Yes. We gave them mathematics, astronomy, architecture, tools to prepare for our eventual return. The great convergence approaches, the reversal of the cosmic alignment that forced our departure. The doors will open permanently soon." A chill ran through me as I understood the implications. "You're coming back." "This was always our world," the voice insisted. "We merely allowed your species to develop in our absence. Some will serve as vessels, others will find new purpose." Leon suddenly collapsed to his knees, the markings on his skin glowing painfully bright. "They're trying to come through now," he gasped, "using us as anchors." The door's surface began to bulge outward, the projection giving way to physical manifestation. The chamber shuddered, ancient stone cracking as energy surged through the space. "The ritual wasn't meant to communicate," Theo realized with horror. "It was meant to stabilize the door for their return. We've accelerated the process." "Break the pattern!" I shouted, dropping my tablet and rushing to Leon. As our pentagon formation broke, the door's pulsing became erratic. The projection flickered, the architect's appearances distorting. "You cannot stop what has already begun," the voice insisted, now tinged with something like anger. "The convergence comes. We will return." The ground beneath us trembled violently. Dust and stone fragments rained from the ceiling as the ancient structure struggled to contain the energies being released. "We need to leave now," Maya urged, already helping Camila gather the tablets. Leon remained on his knees, caught in some internal struggle. I grabbed his shoulders, shaking him. "Leon, we have to go." His eyes cleared momentarily. "The tablets," he said. "Take them. They contain more than the ritual. They have the mathematics to understand the doors." I helped him to his feet as larger chunks of ceiling began to fall. Theo scooped up his detector, and we ran for the passage, tablets secured in Camila's bag. The entire catacomb system shuddered around us as we climbed back toward the surface. Behind us, blue light pulsed erratically from the chamber, growing dimmer as the door destabilized. We emerged into the archaeological site just as a massive tremor shook the ground, the passage collapsing behind us with a deafening rumble. Local security guards ran toward the disturbance, shouting in Arabic. "Keep moving," Maya urged, leading us to an exit away from the commotion. We returned to Hotel Cecil in tense silence, each processing what we'd learned. The architects weren't aliens or interdimensional travelers as we'd theorized. They were Earth's original intelligent species, forced to flee to a parallel dimension millions of years ago. Their interaction with humanity throughout history had been preparation for their eventual return. In our hotel suite, we laid out the tablets on the table, their ancient symbols now charged with new meaning. Leon sat quietly in a corner, the glow of his skin markings finally dimmed to a faint luminescence. "What do we do with this knowledge?" Camila asked, her voice heavy with the weight of our discovery. "Study the tablets," I said firmly. "Understand the mathematics. If the architects are coming back during this convergence, we need to know exactly what that means for humanity." "And Crawford?" Maya asked. "Keep evading him, but we might need to share some of this eventually. Just not the tablets. Not until we understand them ourselves." We worked through the night, translating and analyzing what we could. The mathematics described on the tablets went beyond anything in modern physics. Spatial manipulation theories that made Theo's eyes widen with possibilities. Around dawn, exhaustion finally caught up with me. I retreated to my room, leaving the others still working. After a quick shower, I collapsed onto my bed, my mind still racing with images of the architects and their impossible city. I must have drifted off, because when I opened my eyes again, late afternoon light filtered through the curtains. Something felt different. Wrong. I sat up slowly, my skin prickling with unease. On the wall opposite my bed, where nothing had been before, symbols glowed with faint blue light. Door symbols, hundreds of them, forming a complex pattern across the entire surface. As I watched, they resolved into a map of Earth with glowing points marking locations across every continent. Hundreds of potential door locations, far more than we'd identified from our research. "My God," I whispered, standing to approach the wall. A voice spoke from behind me, a voice that sounded like Theo's, but somehow different, resonating with harmonics that made my teeth ache. "They're not trying to get in, Griffin. They're coming back. This was always their world." I spun around, but my room was empty. The voice had no visible source. The cold spots on my arm burned like ice as the map on my wall pulsed with increasing urgency. The Great Convergence was coming, and we had accidentally helped set it in motion.